Hello, and welcome to the second session of the Science Balanced Assessment System webinar series. In part 1, we focused on the types of assessments that make up the system. In this session, we'll discuss scores, reporting, and data literacy as it pertains to those assessments. So let's start with discussing what are the goals exactly of assessment in general. In an educational environment, assessment is intended as a way to collect evidence to support or refute a specific claim. Perhaps you're making the claim that students have become proficient in the use and understanding of specific standards that have been taught in the classroom. Under this circumstance, an assessment is a tool that's used to collect evidence to support or refute that claim. If results of the assessment provide support for the claim that students are overwhelmingly or satisfactorily proficient in the use and understanding of specific standards, then the teachers, administrators, parents, and students involved can rest easy that the goal's been met. If results indicate that students have not met the goal of proficiency in the use and understanding of specific standards measured, then teachers, administrators, parents, and students have an indicator for remediation. These tools can be immediate, with informal question and answer sessions or modeling activities and productive talk or performance tasks provided during instruction in the form of formative assessments. They may also be focused to specific and identified breaks in instruction to measure summative zones of understanding. In other words, after a complete course or unit of instruction, a set of students might be assessed for their degree of understanding of information during the school year, but before the end of all instruction. These would include things like end-of-unit assessments or interim assessments, benchmark assessments, things like that. For an organization or a complete educational system, there may be a desire or a need to determine how well the system is functioning to meet the needs of its constituent students. Under this circumstance, a state or federal summative assessment is intended to gather evidence that students have met the standards expected of specific gateway years, and in science, this would be grade 5, showing that students are ready for middle school, grade 8, showing student readiness for high school, and high school biology, showing readiness for college or life. We often think of education as a system of inputs and outputs, with inputs consisting of investments in curriculum and materials, professional development, instruction, and student outputs illustrated through classroom and state assessments. And while we all know there's so much more involved in classroom and education of a student, there's no denying that these inputs and outputs are important aspects of the processes of teaching and learning. If used correctly, assessment data can assist teachers and administrators in making wise decisions for the improvement of student learning. Classroom formative assessment data can be used immediately to inform appropriate shifts in instruction to assist with student misunderstandings, and teachers can quickly modify materials or instruction to clarify a point. When interim and benchmark assessments are common across classrooms, then student data can be used to assist with decision-making for local professional development and materials investments. Similarly, if state assessments measure commonly taught information, then outcomes on professionally developed assessments can be utilized to identify weak spots in curriculum and instructional materials that can be fortified or perhaps improve professional development where outputs indicate areas of low performance, noting that areas of high performance need little or no increased attention. A high-quality assessment system can provide relevant and ongoing feedback and information for targeted decision-making to increase efficiency, accuracy, and performance for students at all levels. So when it comes to the science-balanced assessment system, the question we come to ask ourselves is what kind of data will we have available to us and how can we use it? With classroom formative assessment, the teacher is not only assessing students in terms of their knowledge and abilities, but they're modeling true next-generation science practice through the process of gathering information, interpreting student data, and communicating or acting upon the collected information to elicit change in student behaviors and understandings. Formative assessment in the Next Generation Science classroom is the embodiment of next generation science practice with students and for students toward the goal of enhancing the learning process. There can be a formal rubric, but often this process is iterative and focused on productive talk, discussion, and argument in a safe environment where teachers and students are working toward developing ever more complex understanding and use of scientific knowledge in practice across domains. Benchmark, interim, or in the case of next generation science standards and of unit assessments, are generally given at the end of a complete unit of instruction to determine whether students can apply the recently learned next generation science standards to contexts similar to those experienced during instruction. The idea is to gather information related to student mastery of the standards during the school year, while teachers still have time to provide intervention if necessary. Once an end-of-unit assessment is completed, teachers can enter student data into a specialized spreadsheet that is provided to analyze student work. As you can see in this example for grade 5, students are listed along the left column and item numbers are listed across the top. Student responses are listed in the Excel spreadsheet, and when the Calculate button is clicked, items are analyzed using a background algorithm. Items that are correct are highlighted in green, and items that are incorrect are left white. You also notice that there are items in grade columns that are open-ended items requiring teachers to score them using rubrics. The value in this initial analysis is that you can see visually which items gave students in this population difficulty. As a teacher, I would look to this report and quickly identify items in columns 2 and 3 as possible targets for investigation because it looks like quite a few students struggled with these items. At the same time, item 1A and B appear to have been fairly well tolerated by the student population, to the point of almost looking easy. In other words, almost all students seem to have gotten those questions correct. That said, there is more to look at here than a simple right or wrong, and teachers can click the report card button in this interactive sheet to see the following report, which will be specific to his or her student data. In this case, you can see across the top the number of students out of approximately 56 that got each item correct at a glance. This gives a teacher a very quick opportunity to again highlight items 2 and 3 as curious, with 8B and question 9A and B being somewhat curious as well. Further review allows us to look at individual distractor analysis. What answers are students choosing instead of the correct answer? Is there a misconception showing up, or are students guessing, indicating that they just didn't have a chance to learn the information at all? We also see that the test reliability is quite high, right here at 79% or 0.79. High reliability is actually anything above 0.5. So anything over 0.5 is really quite good, and at 0.79, this test reliability is very good, indicating that the assessment is doing a good job of assessing students in the way that it was intended to do. In addition to basic distractor analysis, the rubric for the end-of-unit assessment allows teachers to see what performance expectation, practice, disciplinary core idea, and cross-cutting concept each item is aligned to. Any items creating difficulties for individuals or groups of students can be cross-referenced with the rubric to identify the standard practice, core idea, and cross-cutting concept with which the students are struggling in real time. The state science assessment provides a single proficiency score focused on a single grade of standards. In grade 5, students who will be well below standard, approaching standard, meeting standard, or above standard in their performance on the assessment. The student proficiency score is a measure of whether a student meets the expectations of grade 5 science standards or not. Detailed information regarding student understanding of individual disciplinary core ideas, practices, and cross-cutting concepts are best available through the end-of-unit assessments provided in real time during instruction and through the year. Student proficiency in science is measured by a student's ability to combine ideas and determine how to use them in novel contexts. Therefore, summative assessments are built around item clusters using multiple standards in combination. Student proficiency depends upon the student's ability to identify appropriate practices and content in order to solve or make sense of novel phenomena. So what exactly does that mean? That means, because of the three-dimensional nature of the next generation science standards performance expectations, a student is required to meet at least two of the three dimensions of each standard as they're answering each question. The next generation science standards are not unidimensional or not one-dimensional. In other words, there's not one thing that a student needs to know in order to show proficiency on a standard. A student needs to understand the content, the practice, and the cross-cutting concept, and basically be able to show that they understand what they're talking about, how to use it, and use it in context in order to illustrate proficiency. So each individual item, whether it's part of an item cluster or if it's a standalone item, must use at least two of those three dimensions in order to be considered aligned to the next generation science standards. In addition, all extended response items need to be three-dimensional using all three of those dimensions: the content, the practice, and the cross-cutting concept. Rules of reliability on an assessment requires that at least 5 similarly constructed items with different content and cross-cutting concepts would be necessary in order to get subscores. In order to achieve a valid and reliable subscore for reporting practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas, we would need a minimum of at least 50 items times 15, or 750 items, in order to find out for students whether or not they are performing specifically well for a specific science practice, a specific core idea, or a specific cross-cutting concept, as opposed to a general proficiency in next generation science standards. The assessment currently takes an average student approximately 90 to 120 minutes to complete. In order for us to get subscores that are valid and reliable, to allow us to break these down and say student understands this specific core idea, this specific practice, this specific cross-cutting concept, it would take approximately 30 hours of assessment time to reliably be able to give those kinds of scores. There are no subscores for the grade 5, 8, and high school biology summative assessments. The assessment is a valid and reliable measure of student proficiency relevant to the grade level performance expectations that are assessed, and the assessment is able to be given in a reasonable time frame for students, which is approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours. The state assessment is best referenced as a measure of how well the system has worked to bring our students to standard relevant to the next generation science standards. For detailed and actionable information regarding student understanding of individual performance expectations and their aligned disciplinary core ideas, practices, and cross-cutting concepts, ongoing use of end-of-unit assessments is the most appropriate measure. However, in order to ensure that parents, teachers, and students do understand what it is that they were doing and how they did achieve when they took those state assessments, we do provide student reports that outline levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 in proficiency that describe with a very descriptive achievement level descriptor what it means to be at a level 1, which is not proficient, a level 2, which is below proficient, a level 3, which is at proficient, and a level 4, which is beyond proficiency. So each one of these achievement level descriptors explains and describes exactly what a student is doing in general across the board on the assessment in order for a student to be performing at that level. These achievement level descriptors look slightly different for grade 5, 8, and high school biology because the content, practices, and cross-cutting concepts at each one of those grade levels is different. In addition, teachers and parents are directed to the achievement level descriptive descriptor document that's found at this link provided for you here to review descriptors for each performance level for each standard provided in the standards. Students scoring at a proficiency score of 3 has on average performed at a level of 3 on most of the items on the assessment. Range level descriptors, which are what are illustrated here and available to you in this link, provide detailed descriptions of likely student performance for each performance expectation or each standard assessed using these descriptions. If a student receives a scale score that places their proficiency just between a level 2 and a level 3, then you can surmise that a student's performing just between a level 2 and a level 3 on individual items throughout the assessment. The state test is a general measure of student performance. It's best referenced as a measure of how well the system is working to bring our students to standard. And again, for detailed and actionable information during the time that teachers have students in their classrooms, end of unit assessments provide the best information for actionable work with our students. But these range level descriptors do provide an idea, a qualitative, descriptive idea as to where students are performing on the summative assessment that's provided in 5th grade, 8th grade, and high school biology. So again, if a student is performing at a level 3, then you can go and look at each individual standard and see what that means for that individual standard. If a student is performing somewhere between a 2 and 3, then you know that on some of the items they were performing a 2 and on some of the items they were performing a 3, so they're somewhere right between these two areas. The public report for science has not yet been released, but scores will be posted as we begin to release scores at the end of February, early March. Public reports will be housed on the Data Management and Analytics website as shown here. The link is located right here. When you access that site, you can go to the Student Assessment Performance link that's located here. Okay, the data will be available soon. Standard setting was just completed over the summer. Scores have been calculated. We will be releasing this data very soon. We're just waiting for the release of some of our social studies scores so we can release science and social studies together. So it should be available probably by mid-March. So continue to look for this. You can go into the student assessment performance area in order to find some of this information. It's very similar to what you would find for Smarter Balanced. And you'd be able to get your breakdown of student proficiencies in this area. At the same time, if you go into the identity management system and go to your EdInsight reports portal, which looks like this. Now, recognizing that my system looks a little bit different than yours, so you would click on this icon here, and you should be able to see something that looks very similar to this. Now, I may have a few extra things here than you do, but you would go to State Assessments and click on that. And when you get to there, you can take your choice of sample school reports. There are many that you can choose from, but as an example of the type of report that you might choose to run, you could decide to look at your district score summaries. You would choose that tab and identify the appropriate data values. As you see here, it's very much just a drop-down menu. Select the year, select your district, select the assessment, DESA science, or DESA, I'm sorry, it would be DESA here. Here would be science. You can see that I chose that here. And then, of course, I deleted all of the personally identifying information here, but I did run that for one of our systems here, and you'll see the kind of information that would pop up for you. Okay, and you can run those. If you have any issues in this area, if you're for any reason finding that something isn't working in the drop-down menus, or if you're having any difficulty running any of these, please send us a help desk ticket so that we can make sure that we help you and ensure that you have appropriate ability to run data for your district. Okay. So we hope that you're seeing or starting to see that there's many multiple levels of data and information available for you, and that there's a plethora of benefits to a balanced assessment system that include educator use of data to improve instruction at every level of from their day-to-day classroom to their benchmark sessions within their classroom to their annual systemic level in their classroom. So multiple uses of data to help improve instruction at every level, targeted professional learning for teachers to improve next-gen literacy and pedagogy. So as you're looking at student work, looking at student data, and really finding those areas where there may be some misconceptions or misunderstandings in the classroom or in the content, that really helps to target teachers toward things that they can do to improve what's happening in their classrooms. And then this also, of course, helps students through diagnostic teaching and learning, immediate and informational instructional feedback, because these kinds of assessments really do provide quite a lot of informative feedback for students themselves, who often are concerned that they aren't sure how they're supposed to improve their own learning. So this helps them as well. And then also with informed and strategic professional development, curriculum and materials investments. So this is a really strong push toward connecting assessment with curriculum and instruction and professional development across the board, from day-to-day instruction all the way up through the overarching system. So we hope this time has been well spent. The final webinar in this series, called Connecting Assessment to Curriculum and Instruction, will be held on February 18th. The course is in PDMS and the number is 28633. Hope you have a wonderful day and you know where to find us. Thank you.